Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's live stream. It's an untimely hour, but I decided to share some ideas. I want to speak about selfishness and how this sort of behavior can be justified and can also not be justified. And it tends to lead towards a separation of reality. In moments of selfishness, you can say the subjective reality of the person is more convincing than their objective reality. When we look at greed, greed is not a physical thing, it's a value measurement. It's a value measurement and therefore a justification of those values through action. If you look at people and you see that they are value systems, they have a certain systematic approach to reality that has a sort of value. There's something kind of humorous I say. I've said in earlier talks when I've spoken about selfishness, and I've kind of evoked the idea in the sense that I said, it's kind of like, for how long do people want to keep selling fish? Eventually, living for yourself will not be enough. That is a level of existential maturity. It is when a self-aware being begins to comprehend that it is not only itself in its awareness. The world is here in your awareness. What you're calling you is part of this vast landscape. It's a certain part of it you're identifying with. But eventually the mind will realize that it is being not only the person, but also the world. And then comes the inner interconnectivity. A lot of this whole New Age community that seeks a sort of union, this ultimate kind of, not only the New Age community, sometimes the New Age community is just repeating past, it's like history repeats itself. That means it's very hard to think about the origin of ideas, behavior, and many things because it seems to be a long kind of a lineage of effort involved. Objectively, it's kind of like a math exam. You're given the problem, you know? Subjectively, you are that unknown factor. What that means is eventually the mind will reach its edge. And what that means is the creature's intelligence will see beyond the ways it has classified the world. When this occurs, it opens a new domain of inquiry. Pretty much what that means is we are first considering we are a self, then the awareness is here. So we are choosing to see a kind of individual mode to reality prior to there even being conscious reception of reality. You can say that if each person, the ancients said it like this, they said every person is in two worlds. That means you're born twice and you die twice. And some people were like, born twice? Die twice? Come on, man. I got one birth and death to deal with. Are you kidding? And so, what that notion was the notion that it is first your body awakens to reality. Sensory data begins becoming a reference, a point of reference. When sensory data becomes more contained, it eventually shapes itself. You can say, like the same way psychologists say, by the age of 14, the identity, the individuality of the child has taken shape in some sense. The child has received enough sensory data to see itself as a sort of individual in some sort of game. So that's a level of attainment, believe it or not. Children must climb the mountains of various ways their identities will shift. It's only a wise being who will eventually realize the action does not define the person. We begin to see that when there are deeper dimensions. Let me tell you what's going on. I noticed this in society, you know. I noticed a group of people talking, you know, like I was with a group of people, and then as we were like as there was discussions, I suddenly began to see how the nature of those people changed as the environment changed. And when the values of the environment become a bit, what I like to say, awkward, that's when the artificial aspects of people's minds step in. You see, the issue is people think nobody can see them, nobody can see their thoughts. But people don't realize their behavior is a reflection of their thoughts. You see, so whether you like it or not, you cannot hide how your mind moves because the body is its result. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there comes a sort of interconnectivity of realms, of the objective way reality is held and the subjective way. Because we feel our minds are keeping the subjects we've overlaid upon reality, because we feel we are controlling it, that is why the free will exists. The free will is like how space moves matter as matter. Okay? That's the nature of our free will. It owns a certain space where it can change. So you can say your free will is that aspect of you that can change itself. And people don't realize. People feel they set stories too soon. It's as if you told the child a bedtime story, and the child now, instead of going and searching and trying to, as Rumi says, unfold its own myth, the child wants to follow the bedtime story, you know. And so it is very important, because what I realize education is data, you know. And this data is the issue with the world. This is why the internet set us free. This is why if knowledge did not comprehend that it is all branches of the same tree, there would be no hope. If you notice in many, just pretty much all the great people in history, I noticed the pattern. Their greatness was in keeping alive or living for that idea of somewhere that was better. When that somewhere that was, it's like you can unite the world by realizing whether you have a kind of theological value, or whether you have a kind of secular value for reality, or whatever kind of style of approach you have to the world. There comes the recognition that the moment this creature is identified as an individual, it will seek a location. You see, the issue is, uh, prior to even the person wondering if he's going to hell, he has to heaven or hell, he has to wonder, in some sense, why the design of existence is the way it is. When that question makes you realize that it's too big to be known, then comes contentment with the inevitable. So you see, it's as if like a part of your mind is envisioning the chaos of existence, and a part of your mind is envisioning the order of existence, and eventually both visions are finding themselves to come from the same source. That means if we say the person has an ability to be good or bad, we are in some sense saying the person can be in two different sort of beings. You see, so morality is a decision between a sort of dualism at work. Some people believe that the notion of Satan was a metaphor for dualism. That means this is why the ancient, if you went, it's very interesting. If a person in the New Age community who thinks they're talking to aliens or something goes to like a kind of one of those old school traditional enlightenment yogis in India or something, goes to the mountain, reality is regardless of the way they've accepted it. And when the world becomes unknown, then the self becomes unknown. But when the world can be known, you're like, I can still know myself, you know? So the inefficiency of selfishness, very playfully one can say, how could just selling fish be wrong? You see, I find many people in this life, of course, like, let me tell you what era we're in. We think 2019 is modern times? No. When we can envision a better way the world can be and it's not there, we are still, like, I don't know how to tell you, the world is in ruins, but it is not in physical ruins. It is in a sort of intellectual ruin where people are recognizing the collective system is so inefficient that they are retreating into their own worlds. I find that if there was a sort of option given to the human being, would you like to just live only for yourself, or would you like to live for your species? Look at how I'm wording this. For your species, for the design of existence you are. If you care for all the designs, this is why it's very funny. The moment you care for yourself, you cannot ignore others. Do you see? See, this is why the most selfish people on this world suddenly, the moment their selfishness leads to a mistake or a regret, they suddenly look from the eyes of angels who never sinned. Do you see? That means it is when you go to the extreme of one end, there's a sort of symmetrical switching of context. So what that means is the yin yang symbol gave me the clue, not to just how the balance of the physical reality manifests, but it gave me a clue to the inner structure of reality. You see, the way traditional people came and spoke about the mind was in some sense like we had people like Carl Jung who said, okay, imagine, like they were imagining concentric circles. What that means is imagine like one circle, this circle is consciousness, okay? Then there's another circle around this circle. Imagine I'm drawing this on a piece of paper. The second circle is the subconscious. And then we go, the third circle is the unconscious, okay? It is what cannot be known and what can be known, and the bridge in between, which is the subconscious manifestation of reality. You see, it's very funny. The same way I'm speaking about subconscious, I'll get into the yin yang symbol pattern of it, but I'll tell you this. It's like, not only if you look, okay, here, I'll say, when you look at the yin yang symbol, a white circle is in the black section and a black circle is in the white section. What that is implying, I find, is many things can be ascribed to that. That is a sort of notion that all duality exists in one moment. Okay? So what that means is there's a part of you right now which is being the whole world and thinking there is a person here, and a part of you is being a person thinking it is in a world. I don't know how to say it. It's like if they wanted to give a number to what dimension we're in the second dimension. The first dimension of reality, I'm creating this right now because it's a new way I'm approaching the idea. See, the thing is, the same way. Okay, here's my proposition. Here's what I'm trying to say. When you look at imagine a piece of paper, you draw a dot. If you kept drawing dots right beside that dot, if that dot copied itself, it would become a line. When lines copy themselves, they become a shape. When shapes copy themselves in some sense in a connected way, they become planes. Do you see? Sorry, you see eventually. Sorry, I should say it like this. Dots turn into lines. Lines turn into planes. Planes turn into higher dimensional phenomena. So it is a point of creating what works and replicating it endlessly. That seems to be the evolution. That means if you took that pattern, it would be particle, and then particles kind of multiplied by infinity. Suddenly there come, how would I say it? Anytime there's a movement, that movement redefines. And sometimes the way it redefines is that in one dimension, the moment the being's mind confronts infinity, it has to return to emptiness and then reformat. Literally, the form appears again. For me, it's like your mind is the greatest mystery because it is what is turning the world. That means, of course, the earth is turning in a certain way, but only in the mind can the earth be imagined to turn the other way. So the mind has a freedom, a lack of restriction that objective reality doesn't. So it's as if in this evolutionary process, the purpose of matter was to become thought. And the purpose of thought was to be a mirror to the unknown. It is an unknown kind of sine wave. It's like a sine wave. It's like this kind of like up and down curvature, you know? And this up and down curvature is between knowledge, the known, and the unknown. We are oscillating as the known with a bit of the unknown in it, and as the unknown with a bit of the known in it. Metaphysically, this would mean you are a soul, you are a body in which there is a soul, but you are also the soul of existence where a body is in. It is kind of the inseparability of the individual and the collective. Suddenly you're going to see, you thought you were in a world and separate from the world, but no, my dear being, you are the world. You are the eyes of this universal sector. And what stories do you entertain? What freedom do you give yourself to know yourself? You see, I was having a conversation with my brother about karma. And I asked him what karma is. He says a response, and he asked me what I think karma is. And I told him karma, the way realistically I've seen it, it's my limitations of movement. What that means is there's certain things that are not authorized, and there are certain things that are authorized. This comes through the intuitive aspect. This is when the world begins becoming your voice. When the world becomes your voice, yourself doesn't die. You don't die. You just find your inseparability with all existence. As an existential phenomenon, you recognize that it is what you hold. It is the design of the cup that suggests how full the cup can be, and it is the limits of reality which have a subjective implication and an objective implication. The subjective implication is the study of language. So it's very funny. It's like I remember I was looking for a certain unique kind of. I had a certain question. I searched it on Google. There came a unique response. As I was reading the response, it's as if in another dimension I kind of got a cognition. That means it's very funny. Sometimes I look at how my moment is now, and the reason I find contentment with it because I can exactly imagine the opposite. Your imagination, your subconscious is holding the polar opposite of your truth. Do you see what I'm saying? Don't you find it unique that when the person is in chaos, an angel from the order comes to the person, and when the person is in complete order, a sort of mischievous kind of dark minion comes, like the devil kind of Satan in some sense, uh, makes man into a fool. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is we see a supernatural kind of other in the mind of that being. So what I'm telling you is you can say, some people say the voice of conscience, as if conscience is this other thing. That means as if like aspects of your mind appear to you as voices. And let me tell you something incredible. This is something that's very powerful because when you zoom in on what thought is, you will eventually see a sort of rhythmic relationship of the linear way reality is interpreted with it. There are things that can be known, and there are things that even if you knew, you could not know. The unknown is the door, edge of the door is the last door of the universe. You see, it's the door of this universal sector. That means the inner universe, I walked to its edge, it was the moment. I walked to the edge of the physical universe and it was the moment. You see? So one part of it, you see the limitations of how you as a person have processed data in reality. On another angle, you begin to see kind of, think of it this way. It's as if the person was not an artist. Every moment of his life was his artwork. Like Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi has this quote. He says, "Be living poetry." Like some dude asked him, "Hey man, how do I write poetry?" He's like, "Be living poetry, bro." What he meant is that live a life where the artistic value of it is incredible. What that means is live with a mind free to exist. Your mind is can be very simply not free by how complexly how in how much of a complex way it identifies with phenomena. You see, it's as if I have seen, it's very hard to not acknowledge this. I have walked on the street and I have seen I have seen like a senior, how can I see it? I've seen an old man walk on the street as if he's walking in a new world, and I've seen a kid walk on the street as if he's walking in a new world. Okay? I have seen that it's very, we don't recognize this, guys. We're not taught this. Researchers have not perhaps cared even. You know, I was born in 1991. And prior to that, it's as if I don't know what the world was doing. It's very funny. People feel children when they're young. They are like, oh my God, this other world that I'm going to grow up into and be. But they don't realize how much of that world is functioning based on efficiency and inefficiency. Pretty much our ancestors, not all of them succeeded, even though we are here, that's a kind of victory of them. But on another angle, there were many mistakes made in civilization because it had to. It's as if like sometimes I wondered, can we avoid war in a changing world? That means, can you avoid the chaotic, inevitable response to order? So pretty much, this world is a game of segmentation that the mind generates. The mind is, it's very funny because we are in a kind of moment in history right now where people believe in ideas. Okay, we are, first of all, we are creatures of, I say it like this, we are creatures of attention, we are creatures of thought, and we are creatures of self-expression. Every person, you don't understand, guys. It's very, I'm sharing with you some personal things about some of my insights, and I won't lie, I was in downtown Toronto, and I was sitting in this very nice kind of park, kind of just between class, and I was in some sense, I had my notebook with me, and so I decided to write something. Sometimes I write without knowing what I want to write. You know, it's just the moment kind of has that feel to it that what is in your sight is more than your sight, and therefore you can create it in you. So pretty much I was sitting there and I looked at reality, and suddenly a part of me inside me started kind of sobbing. I suddenly became very hopeless, and I remember I wrote it on in that notebook. It's in one of my in one of these talks I've given recently. What I wrote in that notebook was like, my species is still occupied with costume games. That means I realize people express themselves through their clothing, from they show who they are by adding things to themselves. Okay? And what that means is suddenly the human being's attention for a lot of his life has gone towards a sort of how the person looks in a sort of social game. Okay, for me, society, this is the death of this is the pretty much a sort of annihilation of the human will. When the system is so inefficient that so much value is being destroyed. It's funny, some people are like, my God, the resources on this planet are being wasted. Like some people have this mentality. I am telling you, you are a resource of this planet, which in some sense, if you have no efficient vision to walk towards, you will feel you're wasting life. And that is something that the person may have regrets on, but at the same time you have to walk the walk. This is what I understood. Every living being holds a sort of responsibility that non-existence in some sense is in awe of. What that means is we are the pioneers of how the children of our children's children's the power of whatever you're like in the future. Think of it this way. You are a moment of attention that's just being here. Okay? This is the simplest way I explain it. Now, this moment of attention, wherever your attention goes, the world, in some sense, is opened, is revealed. Okay? Right now, if you move your head to the left, you will access a different domain of sight than when you move your head completely to the right. Okay? Which means that the sensory data is in some sense being directed, and this is the unique mystery. How can a receiving mechanism also be an expressing mechanism? As if the mystery of consciousness is how could cause and effect be the same moment? This eventually will mean the discovery of a new dimension. It is the Buddha, in some sense, got to it. A lot of people in history have got to it. They call it the middle way. They call it the world between infinity, the world between nothingness and infinity. It's very hilarious. Um, we have to create the better ways that we already are. That's kind of, it's very strange. But I'm telling you, this is what I think is happening on this planet. It is getting swallowed by a mechanical box. Okay? And when that happens, people are going to suddenly return to nature as if they were rude to their parents and they're going back. That's how the evolutionary return to nature would be. People will realize they have forgotten the value of a natural entity. And we are so in society, not just society, just the story of the world is, oh my God, how can I tell you? You are fed identity. You are fed ideas because that was what there was to eat. You see, this is why you can't blame the world for how far it has evolved. But you can blame what you are in charge of, which is very unique because your free will exists unconditionally behind your eyes, but your free will in front of your eyes exists conditionally. Because in front of your eyes, you're choosing an objective mode. Okay, for you, not for you. I'm just sharing a certain view here, but it's like you know how you get enlightened when you realize the light of existence is being the story of the world. And then in the intelligence calms down and accesses a new mode of sight. This is the real you, believe it or not, it cannot be explained. That's why enlightenment, teaching wise, is very hilarious. It's very easy. It's a mirror. You know, all gurus in reality, in our history, stretching from what it was. It was to give a mirror. That's it. That's it. When you find the mirror of existence, that's it. You will see it. You will see how sight is being sight. We have to create a sort of it's like we have to. The mountain is a mystery that must be climbed. Once the peak of the mystery is reached, suddenly comes the realization of the journey. Right now, you're journeying. You could choose to even be the most laziest person on this planet, but you will see, regardless of how much you resist or don't resist the world, you will in some sense be pulled forth by time, which in some sense is the notion of a changing world. This world changes. If they ask, everybody right now is active, okay? But they are active in a subtle way. We have to understand, we just like how the father has an expectation from the son, the human being has an expectation from the world. That expectation from the world becomes the kind of atmosphere where their beliefs are born. Selfishness exists when you worship yourself. Worship, like you literally make yourself into God. You feel yourself is the only truth. I find they preach that in a lot of kind of like mystical teachings, the one true self. I've spoken about it, kind of examined it in different ways in these talks. But I can tell you there's a silent truth and there's a kind of a truth that can be vocalized because language has limits. My approach to knowledge right now, just the ultimate knowledge of this of the being, is in some sense a consideration of what to do with what is here. That's it. For me, it's as if, like, sure, you can live for the future, but you'll miss the present. You can live in the past and you'll still miss, the present and the future. We have to recognize a sort of emptiness that will liberate the species. This emptiness is very powerful because it is a reflection of an ability of the mind to not see meaning and to see meaning. When I have a memory from my childhood, one of my earliest memories before I learned language, I was just aware and looking. And I wasn't an individual. It's very funny. It's like when the child learns language, and that's when a person comes into existence. You'll see, like Tarzan didn't know how to speak, so Jane was like, oh my god, this dude's an animal. This guy's like a fucking, like, savage. Okay, but the moment Tarzan suddenly in that movie began learning how to speak, suddenly Jane, for example, saw the innocence of kind of like, it doesn't like do you know how many characters and stories there has been where the character was this savage powerful person, but the person's mind did not was so limited that it was as if they had the innocence of a child. It's like somebody with a blindfold on punching somebody. Like, can you really blame them? Do you know? So what I'm saying is, like, it's one of those conditions. This whole game of the condition, it's like this. Think of it yin. You can apply the yin yang design to this. So what that means is there is a consciousness that is being everything, and there is some part of it being unconscious. That means, like, how would I say? I'll say it like this: spirituality and religion first unite through the recognition that both in religion it is said the will of God, regardless of any religion, it would apply. The will of God is unknown. Okay? In spirituality, they begin to see the self that is being the world is unknown. Every human being will eventually reach the edge of knowledge. When you reach the edge of knowledge, you will eventually come to the present moment. You will see that intelligence is the response. It's a sort of ability to respond to the moment. It is a sort of responsibility as a part of your universal sector to the greatest potential of your vision. It's as if this world is not asking people for much. It is saying that you're naturally here. This is your habitat. You can do whatever you want. You can justify whatever reason to do whatever. I will tell you, people can convince themselves. It's just like somebody who doesn't want to eat ice cream and then says, okay, maybe this once. So their mind generates reasons. The mind begins to, your desires are powerful because they are the animal in you wanting something instantly. There was a very interesting philosophical discussion on the nature of the human being and the nature of other animals and when they are born. It's as if when you see a deer that's born or a cat that's born, that deer suddenly, the baby deer already comes into this life with a design of, with a knowing of how to it should behave, how to walk and move and whatnot, right? So many animals are born with an innate, it's as if they have an ability. They have an ability, they come with what, it's like their design is a full kind of program. Okay, but the human being, the child, you have to take care of it, walk it for a while, speak to it for a while, and eventually the entity begins, in some sense, learning to independently be its own expression, to generate value no longer dependent on external circumstances. That's when you, in some sense, access a sort of unconditional state of being. It's a bliss state, okay? Like, it's like, if we were all like ancient yogis on a mountain, we would probably call it the state of Satchidananda. That's when it's very beautiful. That's when your intelligence has been discovered to be inseparable with the intelligence of all phenomena. You're suddenly, the world has become a field of intelligence rather than an intelligent particle envisioning a field. The unknown moves knowledge, and knowledge becomes the purpose for the unknown. It's very fascinating. That means there's a dimension where creatures know things and they're wondering about what they don't know, and there's a dimension. Oh my God! It's the veil, guys. It's the veil. It's the veil. What that means is, as I'm speaking right now, okay, this is a sort of metaphysical wonder. I'm going to try something out right now. I'm going to share a sort of viewpoint with you. We're in a dimension, right? We're in a world right now where we know some stuff, and a lot of it is unknown because it's huge and it's big and whatnot. And many of us are wondering, where are, like, this is called Fermi's paradox. Where is everybody? Pretty much, this dude's like, where are all the aliens? Where are all these civilizations? That means physically the world is vast, but why is there not a human being? Sorry, why is there not other civilizations, other beings, right? And in some sense we wonder, okay, but it's like, I'm saying the same relationship we have with the unknown is the same relationship others, another dimension where beings exist, have. We are as if a double-sided kind of mirror, and it's strange because it's as if we only see what we put into life, and I don't know how to tell you guys. It's like a mirror. It's a mirror. The edge of the world is a mirror. It's like man found God and suddenly asked God, why was I created, and why was my mistake not forgiven, and why did man fall? Why did the God of the universe not forgive, in some sense, the mistake of his creation? Okay, so in some sense, one can say religion is is in some sense God's mistake allowed to continue by God. The notion of destiny is very important because it brings the notion of a simulation of reality. We have to wonder, like, there was a guy, I forget his name, Michael something, Talbot? No, I forget the guy's last name, but this guy wrote a book called The Holographic Universe. I haven't read the book, but I saw an interview of him. And it's very interesting because it's kind of like, as we see that our body is, in some sense, our mind and body are the same moment, the deeper depths of your mind exist, okay? But they exist in accordance to how you hold the world. I'm going to tell you a story of an innocent fool in nature. And this story is a story that came to me when I was very young. It was said to me. And the story is, believe it or not, it's like a sort of personalities given to a scorpion and a frog who are really close friends. And the frog comes to the scorpion and says, "Hey, bro, I'm gonna, in some sense, go. I'm gonna go to the other side of the pond. You know, it's like my vacation time's over. I'm gonna go back to work." And so the scorpion looks at him. It's like, "Yo, man, I gotta come with you, bro. We're friends." Like, you know, something like that. And they are true close friends. Like, I want to give that impression. The frog says, "You can't come, man. You're a scorpion. You're gonna sting me and I'm gonna die." Okay? And the scorpion's like, "No, please take me on your back. Like, we can do this, you know, friends for life, you know?" Right? Some notion like that. Okay? And the frog looks at his friend and he's like, "Am I a good person or am I not?" And he's like, "Okay, I'll do it." And so what he does is he allows the scorpion to go on his back and he begins swimming. And the scorpion also, he makes the scorpion promise not to in some sense sting him. Okay? Because if he stings him, looks at the scorpion, he's like, "Bro, if you sting me, we both die. So if you care for your life, you don't sting me." Okay? And so they go. Now what happens is they're really close to getting to the shore. Okay? They're really close to getting to the shore. And suddenly the frog feels the journey's almost over. Suddenly he feels a sting. And he just gets shocked. It's like he just wants to turn around to the friend and like, "Are you serious right now?" And so what happens is the scorpion, with a very authentic sorrow, with a real sorrow, looks at him, and the frog says, "Why did you sting me? Do you understand what you've done?" And the scorpion looks at him and he's like, "Sorry, but it's my nature. I couldn't hold it back. It's my nature." And so the story is beautiful and profound at the same time. Another story that relates to this is a story of a man, an old man who saves a bear, and the bear in like the universe of this story looks at the old man and says, "Old man, you have saved my life, and I will forever be your best friend and protect you and help you. You've saved my life. I will protect you." And so what happens is, and the moral is about kind of like foolishness and friendship. And so and so what happens is, like, the old man who saved this bear, he's like, of course I'm alone, so come and be the bear son I never had. So in some sense, the bear's like, I never had a dad, you know. He's like, you're a bear, you know. It's like, this is strange, you know. It's a father-son moment between a bear and an old man, you know. But the bear is in some sense like a friend. I'll bring it back to the context of a friend, you know. Let's not be too silly. uh, the bear decides to be the friend of the old man. The old man accepts this, and their friendship grows, and it becomes a very good thing. Suddenly, one day, the old man is sleeping, and a fly comes onto his head. And that's when suddenly the bear looks at the old man with the fly, and he's like, this fly has dared touch this graceful savior of mine. And he takes a huge rock to kill the fly and accidentally kills the old man. And that's the end of the story. And the moral of it is, you see, you gotta have have this, I call it this, other wit towards life, where you recognize the design of various systems and the potentials and the capacity of influence that these designs and systems can. The human being is a very complex design. This is why the free will becomes more into an unknown territory when people are speaking in a social scenario. But when a person is alone in a room with like objects or something, he suddenly feels extremely comfortable. Why? Because there is no other implication of what is real or what is valid. The free will has no challenger. But in society, the free will has a challenger, and if the free will of the being is strong, they remain authentic. The world doesn't change them too much, and they in some sense maintain and cultivate their true nature. They forget, they think like this. Children will think like this, that regardless of what happens to me, I am a being and I am a design in this world. Okay? And so you respect what you are before trying to communicate or do anything. Because if you don't, you won't exist. You see, you don't understand. This is why I always wondered, and I've even commented on this, that the samurai were rare thinkers. They had such a mind preserved by certain values, that their culture was insightful, and what if we were to study would seem like alien to us, extraterrestrial sort of ways and modes of acknowledgement these beings had of reality. Not that they saw other forces, but the fact that they recognized that the maneuverance of the conscious will is through an honor of its existence. When you honor your ancestors, what are you honoring? You're honoring the existence that continued. That gives you a great power. That's when I say you find the love of the species. Right now, your species is fragmented into various groups, segmented by various ideas. Every person is trying to live in their own world until the end of days, and in some sense, it's this ridiculous situation of kinda, we are not living like animals, but our minds and our communications with one another is still animalistic. And the reason it is still animalistic is because there is war. Imagine, as long as there's bad news on TV, not that they shouldn't show it. I think it's a great thing they show bad news, because they show you what needs to be responded to. They show you uh, how the road of the future generations must be. Still, that child that wants attention as a species. We are still trying to own particles in space. When scientists said we are all stardust, I'm like, yo, man, you can't get any deeper than that. You know, scientists for me have said the most deepest thing in reality. They said you're made of star stuff. Sorry, you're made of stardust. That means the atomic particles that are being me are as ancient as time, even before time was invented conceptually. You have to recognize, I kind of said this good metaphor. I said, when you look at politics, you see that the political system does not change as much as the people it governs. So the people in any political system will eventually be changing in such fast ways that the political system cannot adjust to all their views. So you can say, if we wanted to think of an efficient government, we have to, in some sense, recognize all governments were created. So if there was to be a recalibration to find the better solution, there has to be an initiative to start anew. Okay, it is the permission that the past has to give the future, or it will cease to exist. You see, it's like two opponents on a battlefield. Suddenly this third kind of opponent comes, which is stronger than both of them, and suddenly the enemy of my enemy is my friend in that situation. So suddenly one sort of chaos stops because a greater chaos has been acknowledged in the sphere of awareness of the entity. The world revolves around the self. You can say that what you consider to be the world, and whatever linguistic, language based meaning it has for you, that is all orbiting a sense of self, which mainly is just 70% of it is just involuntary occurrence of existence, and 30% of it, only in its waking state, has claim to be an intelligent form. You see, that means, trust me, it's like the person who wanted to find a way. It's like, imagine in the future, we imagine, like, I'll probably add this to my science fiction novel. But imagine in the future they found a way to make the person never need to sleep again and always be their body's energized. Okay, as if you reached a point where you never needed to sleep. When you never need to sleep, imagine you didn't sleep, suddenly you never needed to sleep again, you will suddenly realize a new sort of kind of our brains will evolve differently then. Okay, because sleep is a kind of shifting of reality. So we will suddenly, the novelty will be at siege. So that means creativity will diminish if there is not this kind of movement into unconsciousness and consciousness, unconsciousness, unconsciousness. You see, it's as if the surfer would be disappointed if the waves didn't keep coming. Just a second, guys. I'm trying to drink this iced cappuccino where the only the ice is left. I've made this observation that whatever the person concentrates on and puts their attention on, they increase the temperature of. Just like as the temperature increases and particles in a certain space begin to move much quicker. Okay, for example, the pressure and the temperature have an influence. I find similarly we can see all physical patterns to also be subjective. They could be metaphors for thought. Um, what do you do with an attributeless awareness? Let's say that's the question. What does the king do with his invisible kind of cloak or his invisible suit as he walks in the streets? This is a story, guys. This is like some, like, I don't know who the. There's no way I know. Like I cannot. Like I don't know who the person was, but this is like a bedtime story where there was this king that hires these two tailors that rip him off by creating an invisible, kind of like king's outfit. And this invisible king's outfit, obviously it's a rip off, but the king was like, okay, I'll take it. And so the king wears this invisible outfit, and people are like, holy shit, the king's gone crazy. He's walking. naked on the streets, like it was like hilarious. Okay, and this is all a story I'm telling. I it's a bit like kind of like old story. It's not something I'm saying. Like it's something. Anyways, the fragmentation of intelligence based on language and the classification of various images. When one looks at what the mind is, it is actually how the attention in the moment is evoking its existence. So when you go to look at what your mind is, you, believe it or not, actually are reflected back into looking at how what you know is kept. So you look at your physical existence, you instantly find contentment, you move on. You allow your attention not to be as is stuck in a snapshot of how the world should be. It's life is too dynamic. The higher levels of human intelligence are dynamic uh, states. Okay, so what that means is it's kind of like, believe it or not, this show called like when I was young, it was this show called Dragon Ball Z, and pretty much the whole idea of it was there were these two characters who kept out. Uh, they kept becoming stronger than one another, and one of them was behind, but one of them, the main character of the whole series, was like always attained the greatest power. And but it was constantly about how the limits of evolution were pushed by a conscious effort to be that power, to be that strength. As and for in the context of that story of the Dragon Ball show, uh, the notion is that the character of the person, once confronted by the ultimate challenge, also attains the ultimate resolve. And so this is why fear is a waste of time when you're an evolutionary entity. You see, when the world changes, even no fear can be the same. You know, it's as if like if you're afraid of something in one day, you have a certain fear. If you're afraid of something the next day, you also have it's a totally new approach to the same situation. So it's a sort of management of how conception has replaced the world. Okay. The inefficiency of it. Let's get back to this idea. Um, it can be. See, it's like the whole notion of there's some schools of thought that declare war on the ego and they feel it's a deception. There's some schools of thought and that see the ego as just the only thing and everything else is nothing of value. Some people are in their ego, some people are out of it. However, I am part of the school of thought that just simply considers the ego as a inner technology. And when I say a technology, that means not something that has to be true all the time, but it requires to be as true as it has a sort of utility. Okay, so that means if you ask me, am I a creature of thought? Okay, if I'm speaking to someone, yes, I am a person. Okay, but when I'm that moment where I'm like, how can I say it? Am I getting ready to sleep in my bed and my eyes are closed? It's like the moment before I drift into the ambience of the unknown, silent, kind of edge of my consciousness. Like before sleep, I come into the state of just, I don't know how to say it, guys. It's very interesting. Sometimes thoughts turn to immense feelings, where in one feeling, like you know how they say, uh, a picture is 1,000 words, and a film is like 1,000 pictures, whatever. Like you know how there's that kind of idea. An emotion captures 1,000 thoughts. It's a sort of, what I'm trying to say is that we explore the mind not by just diving into the imagination or accepting only what making the personal dimension the justification of truth. We, in some sense, advance from our individual positions towards the wonder of a what if scenario of the greatest efficiency. So, kind of, Mr. Within is saying, okay, we're 8 billion creatures on this planet. If we think we're just bodies, oh no, overpopulation, god damn it, But if we think we are minds, we will see that each mind holds within itself various visions. That means it's very easy to change your mind because the world changes it automatically. The Buddha said something. These were the 3 jewels of Buddha. It was the acknowledgement of imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness, and how the world is held or should be held, and how intelligence is an expression of itself. A word I really kind of revere is the word self-effulgent. I saw certain Tibetic texts talk about a sort of self-effulgence, a sort of illusion discovered as the effect of truth. And this truth is not a value, it is the one giving the value. So there is a sort of, your subconscious is like looking from the behind the shoulder of your consciousness and being like, you don't see a lot of things, man. Because in front of our eyes the world is made of particles, and therefore dimensions have come into existence, and these dimensions have found a way to relate to one another, so therefore multiple dimensions have arose. So externally there's a multidimensional layout to many things. Like a tree is not a tree, it's just a complex, it has also a complex atomic structure. Okay, so the notion that when I'm looking at a tree right now and it's all atoms, that's a sort of kind of abstraction imprinted upon the same dimension. It's an extension of the isness of that object, okay, the being of that object. So in some sense one begins to see that it's all honestly a kind of masquerade. I feel this is the Venetian kind of wisdom of their masquerade parties, that it's not the same way that if you don't see somebody's face, you and they don't see yours, you're just left as your faceless expressions. So your body language becomes your only speech, it becomes your only voice. So you can, in some sense, be anyone. Because I feel I choose to entertain the notion that we were hunter gatherers, and that evolutionary pattern somehow is active in the DNA's expression throughout the lifetime. I feel the hunter gatherer mindset was valuing the importance of attention. That means the hunter saw the objective and then got it. Okay? So that's how we approached reality. That's how our ancestors behaved. They hunted. Okay? They saw something they need and they got it. Okay? That's their approach. This, let's say, over a long period of time, the establishment of this mentality led to a sort of behavior where the person sees something and wants it. So suddenly, it's like it wasn't just the animal the hunter wanted to hunt. It suddenly became everything the hunter wanted in the world. And I feel if we're not doing anything different than our ancestors, in some sense, we are insane as a civilization. If we are still abiding by patterns where our conscious free will can recalibrate to a totally new, efficient structure of reality, then it's kind of like a group of people saying, we can't change, the idea of this movie, bro. And then the director being like, yeah, we can. So it's one of those things like I feel like we have to first build the greatest question, and then once we find the greatest question to ask, we're pretty much, as a species, as a civilization, are wondering what is the most valuable, efficient way we can see the world. The world is like, it's like, can you blame the ancient Egyptians for worshiping the sun? Like, it's just light in our eyes that is the world. It's so delicate. The human being is so fragile that they don't recognize the incredible access they have to a sensitive notion of the world. This sensitive is not a sort of innocent kind of like the person is too weak, so the world is like, all right, I'll respect the fact that you're so weak. I won't do anything. Like, it's like it's. I feel it should be we should have this attitude where we should seek the most intelligent way that our attention can move in this life. And then automatically the world will update towards a direct experiential clarity. When we understand, we shouldn't call it uh, society, we should call it the collective social construct. Okay? And because we should see it is that it is something being designed, and something where it's as if, like, you know what it is, it's like incredible gamers are brought into a place, but their computers, it's like they're in a place where there are no computers, you know. And imagine for like one of these esport gaming, like, how would I say it? It blew my mind. It was like it's become like it has an audience as big as like a football stadium, you know. And pretty much what I'm saying is like somebody with ability, with a imagine some like you bring a great violinist and ask him to play like the trumpet, and the violinist is like, why am I playing the trumpet? I should be playing, like, for example, the violin. Give me a violin and I will show you true art. Give me a trumpet and I will show you true failure. And so my notion is that it's as if the same situation. Our intelligence is not just based on what we accumulate or how much data we accumulate. It has to do with adjusting the conditions of the external to allow efficiency of the mind. This is a sort of natural revolutionary kind of view, that rather than us blocking ourselves out of nature, we have a symbiosis approach. We realize man must not fear his world and hide in a bunker of technological kind of soullessness. You know, it's like we should not hide the spirit in a machine. The spirit should allow this machine to become a comrade in the same battlefield. Create a technology that will be able to update itself quicker than we are getting. Like, we will no longer be the most intelligent data-based entity, data processing entity on this planet. Okay, and so we're wondering what would we do if we create the boot that is going to crush our anthill. So like we have that sort of notion. Um, I'm trying to just share this idea that the unknown will come across as an uncontrollable force, and so the free will choose to take the ostrich method and choose to keep its head in the dark. What this will mean is that rather than adjusting to the world, we will try to escape the world into a sort of comfort. You see, sometimes there comes an opportunity cost. You know, sometimes it's like, I remember hearing this thing that psychologists were saying that couples who've lived together for a long time, so imagine like a person, imagine like, how would I say it? Like two couples, okay, this like old couple, not old couple, let's say this there's a divorce, and this the couples that depart, their memory suddenly changes because their memory was based on the other partner's intelligence. Like some things that partner remembered, some things that partner remembered. They relied on each other as kind of intelligence systems. The moment those two people depart, they're not they don't have access to the same intelligent environment, the same pattern, the same atmosphere. Their memory begins to function differently and recreate different patterns. This is why I find this perhaps is more intensely for women, but it's one of those things where the intensity of the adjustment, it's like a shift of inner environment. Okay, so when the person goes through a breakup, it's a shift of an inner environment. And this inner environment means one has to stop adjusting to the same emotions as they had before, stop wanting to keep the past, and continue to have an explorer's attitude to the world in regards to, how can I tell you? It's like, okay, I'll get back to the symbiosis thing between man and nature. The same way those two partners had that relationship, their memory suddenly was different when they were not with each other. Similarly, I find the human being's intelligence, the other aspects of our brain, were active when we were in our natural environment. When we came out of our natural environment, we also got rid of a chunk of our intelligence. So I find that this is the evolutionary return to nature, the recognition that the greater dimensions of our intelligence will open as we not try to avoid the natural world, but to, in some sense, efficiently integrate it. As man returns to nature, his mind also returns to nature. When his mind returns to nature, he will care for nature. Why should nature be cared for? Because the future deserves better. That's the inefficiency of selfishness. The person who's selling fish his whole life will have missed out on many ways that life can happen. This is why we should soon become, we should get rid of borders and create a global society where any person can, in some sense, not only person, but children can, in some sense, go travel in many countries. The human being, before he dies, can see the world. Efficient vision will lead to efficient action once that vision has not avoided the waves of data the world has given you so far. Seldom it is said, but the self of selves is an ever present moment. Your mind is the world where your body is in. And then when the mind wonders how it's contained, how it's a body for another world, it suddenly begins to see the unknown holds knowledge. So eventually you're going to see the ability of attention to associate with anything is endless. Therefore, you stop associating. Guess what? Ancient yogis and mystics were doing this. And so you stop associating, and so you suddenly allow your mind to revalue the moment based on its how you're naturally here. I feel like I should share one more story. this samurai, not samurai, but this imperial swordsman, he comes home and sees his servant is sleeping with his wife. And back in that culture, he's like the main swords kind of instructor of the imperial army and whatnot. He comes home, sees this situation happening. He looks at the servant, and the servant's like, "Oh shit," you know. And so he looks at the servant and says, "Come outside." He doesn't get angry. He doesn't do anything. He just looks at the servant and says, "Come outside." Okay. Uh, and what happens is that uh, the servant comes outside, and it's a very shocking moment. The imperial swordsman looks at the thing, and the wife doesn't speak because the wife knows how he has dishonored his husband. So the wife is quiet, and so the man looks at the servant, the imperial swordsman, and throws a sword at him. He has two swords. He throws a sword at the guy, and he looks at him and he says, "Fight." As if like he's saying, "Well, we're settling this right now. Okay, you don't just come here and dishonor my existence," something like that. And so what happens is that what happens is like the servant is trembling with fear in some sense, and he's like, oh, he looks at him and he suddenly remembers his guru, how he had promised he would see his guru before, like you know, and so he suddenly looks at him and says, "Listen, buddy." He's trying to like do some Wall Street negotiation. No, I'm joking. Well, what he does is that he looks at the imperial swordsman and he says, "Listen, I have to go speak to my guru, but I will be back." And because it had a sort of Eastern kind of notion of honor in the culture, the guy in the story comes back, and like he will come back, and so like he's not lying to run away. So what he does is the imperial swordsman says, "Okay, tomorrow I will see you here, same time." And what happens is that the servant leaves, and the servant goes to the forest and finds his like kind of Buddha-like teacher. And he looks at his Buddha-like teacher, and he's like, "Hey man, what do I do?" Like he explains the whole situation, and the teacher suddenly is like, "Let me just meditate on it." And the teacher goes into this kind of silent and still meditation for a while, and eventually something comes to him, some awareness comes to him, and he in some sense looks at the guy, and his disciple, like that the servant, and he says, "Listen, you have done something that in some sense, the servant was hoping like the guru would tell him, okay, don't worry about it, just sit here and meditate for like 100 years, And so what happens is that his guru looks at him, the Zen guy, and he looks at him and says, "Listen, I will give you one advice. Live as if it's your last day in this existence." And that statement hits this man deep. The next day, imperial swordsman is waiting for the servant. The servant comes. The imperial swordsman throws the sword and is kind of about to say something to the servant. The servant is not waiting. He just picks up the sword and fights as if literally he feels this is his last moment in this existence. So he is giving everything. It's like because he knows he's going to lose everything, he's giving everything. Okay, he's choosing to apply the efficient vision. Yeah. So what happens is he takes the sword, the servant, and fights with a sort of kind of hysteria, as if he feels he's gonna die. So he's just giving it everything he has, and he fights with an intensity and determination because, in such an intense way that the swordsman, imperial swordsman, suddenly sees, oh my God, this kid's demonstrating something the greatest warriors had. They had this kind of endless endurance of going forth. Okay? And so the imperial swordsman, what happens is suddenly he looks into the eyes of this servant who's fighting for his life and sees that the servant, the terror of non-existence is like his he has found the ultimate value of life, you know? And so in some sense he sees he cannot beat an opponent that will not stop. And so suddenly he becomes a bit clumsy for a second and the sword falls from his hand, which means in some sense the servant wins. And there's this incredible silence. And the Imperial Swordsman just looks at the servant and just nods, as if like, okay, whatever that had happened has now been resolved. And so the servant walks away, and as the story says, the servant after 3 days becomes enlightened. What that means is he begins to realize the incredible value that the moment has prior any idea of truth, kind of segmenting it into the domains of imagination where it will be forever an infinite unknown mystery. Reality is here. That's the clue. Here and now, that's like all this kind of new age kind of like oneness talk. That's a clue. That's a notion that your experience is starting here. It's here, and there's the notion that it arises kind of the awareness of being here. And then because it has arose the awareness of being here, the awareness of not being here also goes. It's kind of as if a memory of a soul evolving through various stages of matter. It's kind of like that's a playful kind of metaphysical way you can say it. So guys, thanks for tuning in. And that was the story. I hope this talk was helpful. It's kind of strange. I sometimes when I give these live streams, I see like various people tuning in, but I think like something interesting I should do is start a live stream where I put a Discord, and then have this kind of group kind of conversation on these things. I think that's a pretty cool idea actually. But so anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and something about patience and clarity I should probably say. Ask yourself how your intelligence is here. You will come to an observance. As you're in that observance, you will notice that this awareness of self is the observer. So your attention becomes intelligence, and patience and clarity becomes the observer's contentment with the changing. Much blessings and namaste.